Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Last week we discussed about Vishuddhimagga, a great work of Acharya Budhharakkhita, in which he has put the essence of the Buddha's teaching in one gatha, in one verse. This verse is Sile patithaya naro sapanyo chittang panjancha bhavaye atapi nipako bhikkhu so imang vijataye jatam. It seems a deva appeared before the Buddha in the middle of the night when he was walking up and down and doing walking meditation. And this deva asked the Buddha, who in this world, anto jata bahi jata, there is entanglement within and there is entanglement without. Both the world, the entanglements of all kinds exist in the mind, in the internal world, and in the external world. Everywhere there is involvement and entanglements of all kinds. Who, pray, O Gautama, will disentangle all these entanglements? Here entanglements refer to the mental defilements arising basically from greed, hatred and delusion. Now, this all-pervading entanglement is another name for samsara, worldly existence. So the Deva asks, there is involvements and entanglements everywhere and caused by the beings themselves. So pray, who will disentangle all these? Or what path will lead to the disentanglement and disinvolvement from all this worldly involvements in the prevailing everywhere? So the Buddha replied by saying, Sile patithaya naro sapanyo. Here is an intelligent person who, having undertaken himself the task of cultivating, literally it means establishing oneself on the path of virtue, which means moral purification leading to perfection of morality. And then Sile patithaya naro sapanyo chittang panyancha bhave. Having established himself on the path of moral purification, he further undertakes to develop and perfect the mind, which is the instrument for liberation and for perfection of morality. And then further he undertakes to develop and perfect wisdom, which brings about liberation from from the recurring existence of worldly existence, of samsara, worldly existence. In other words, this gatha, the Buddha said that having established oneself on the path of purification and thus perfecting morality, then developing mind and perfecting the mind, and then developing wisdom to perfect wisdom leading to liberation from worldly existence and from all involvements and entanglements caused by beings themselves. internal as well as the external. So having taken up this voluntarily oneself, not imposed by others, but it is self-imposed discipline. Having overtaken up this self-imposed discipline on oneself, one starts perfecting oneself in moral purity, and then further expands this process, spiritual process of development by perfecting the mind, or disciplining the mind, and then disciplining further. Wisdom here stands for the disciplining knowledge, intelligence. Now, this is having undertaken this oneself without being imposed by anybody else. Once one does that and assiduously puts forth effort, atapi, and brings about spiritual maturity, nipako, it is such a person that is able to disentangle himself or herself from the bondage of samsara, worldly existence. Now this one gatha summarizes the entire teaching of the Buddha. The teaching is based on how from a state of ignorance to a state of light, enlightenment, from a state of impurity of the worldly existence to a state of purity and perfection. How life itself becomes the path, leading one from ignorance to enlightenment, impurity to purity, and from vice to virtue. Now, this is the path that ultimately, you see, stands for all that the Buddha says. Whatever the Buddha taught can be brought within these three words: Sila, Samadhi, Panya. The path of Shila, moral purification; the path of mental purification, purification of mind; and the path of purification of wisdom, or the intelligence faculty. Now, these three constitutes actually what is known as the middle path, the Majjhima Patipada, the middle path approach of the Buddha, which avoids all extremes in the name of religion. One is the extreme of indulgence of all kinds. You can see that happening now in the name of Deepavali and some religious thing. What an amount of knowledge pollution, rather noise pollution goes about all over the country. And all this is religious. There is nothing but making noise, which helps nobody really, but it is a kind of indulgence in pleasure of some kind. So this tendency to indulge in pleasure in the name of religion is an extreme practice. Whatever sanctity human beings give to this kind of practice, it is entirely nothing but an extreme way of practicing religion. So having avoided this kind of extreme of indulgence, on the one hand indulgence in pleasure, and on the other hand the opposite, indulgence in pain, in the name of tapasya, in the name of all kinds of penances. So having avoided both, one takes to the middle path of which leads to perfection at three levels. Perfecting the moral life, perfecting the mind, and perfecting the intelligence faculty which opens up wisdom. The path, the wisdom by which one directly experiences the true nature of things. Wisdom deals with reality, and reality in order to free the mind from the bondage of ignorance. When one is freed from ignorance and delusion through wisdom, it is then that one achieves enlightenment, Bodhi, another word for freedom from samsara. Now, this one verse, the Venerable Buddhaghosa was given this verse when he went to Ceylon. He is the author of Visuddhimagga. Today I would like to tell you something about this great Acharya, Acharya Budhharakkhita. According to the biography left, ancient teachers have left about him, known as the Budhharakkhita Utpatti, a great book indeed on a great life. So Budhharakkhita was originally, he was born somewhere near the modern Bodh Gaya, in the Gaya district, somewhere near Gaya maybe, in a place called Ghosa. And he was born in a family, the head of the family was one great scholar, was known as a Sanskrit scholar and scholar in Veda. His name was Kesi, and his mother was also a great scholar known as Kesini. So hailing from a family of a very well-known scholar, Brahmin scholars or masters in religious literature and so on, he used to visit from time to time the Buddha Gaya, the place where the Buddha became enlightened. Under that tree he used to recite some of the sutra, his slokas that he liked very much. Particularly the Patanjalis, he used to like a particular sloka where he recited about chitta vritti nirodhaha, the coming to an end, exhaustion, and ending of all the chitta vritti, all the mental upheavals and so on. But he didn't know the meaning, this deeper spiritual meaning of that. So however, he used to recite. So one day, the Arahat Revata, who stayed there in Buddhagaya, he heard it, and as an Arahat, he penetrated in his mind and found out that here is a great person who is born from the Devaloka down as a human being, and who is capable of restoring all the commentarial literature that was lost during those days, that in the 4th century AD, now about 1,000 years after the Buddha. Now, those days, while they had that original text, the Tipitaka, which preserves the words of the Buddha in their pristine purity, whatever the Buddha taught for 45 years, the Tipitaka preserves all the teachings in their pristine purity, and it is found even today. It has been kept, it has been preserved in the form of Theravada, the path of the elders, of the wise ones. Now, the Theravada Tipitaka was available, but not the commentarial literature which opens up the deeper meaning. So, the Arahat Revata, he saw that he has the capacity to go, and though he didn't know Pali at all, being a Sanskrit scholar, he didn't care to know. He actually made fun of it. And those days being very sectarian, and they had this caste feeling, so he didn't care, but he liked to come and sit under the tree and read those slokas. So, when he saw that he had that possibility, he just one morning, he said, who is that? Ko gadhavo vya ravati. Who is it? Who is like a donkey braying all that? So when Budhharakkhita heard that somebody is calling his recitation as a donkey's bray, he was rather roused. He was a young scholar. So he said, what do you mean by braying? And what are you doing, sir? Then he says, look, do you know the meaning of what you are reciting? He said, this is the meaning. He said, no. That's why I call it a bray. The deeper meaning is this. The meaning of Nirodha means the end of samsaric existence. It is not just exhaustion of something. It is a cessation of the recurring existence once and for all. Do you know the path of that? He says, no, that I don't know, I am only a scholar. He said, if you want to know, it can be told. He said, yes, I would like to know, Venerable Sir, please do teach me. He said, no, I am not going to teach you unless you lead the holy life. If you want to know the deepest truths, if you want to have a direct experience of reality of the nature of samsara, which means recurring existence, coming again and again, dying again and again, and being reborn again and again. And this process goes on ad infinitum because the mind is affected by kilesa or mental defilements. When the mind is affected by mental defilements, mental pollutions, then a person commits all kinds of unwholesome actions, karma. And these unwholesome karmas, karma in Sanskrit, Pali karma, these karmas, when they are sanchaya, they are accumulated as a karmic force. At the end of life, these accumulated karmic forces lead to rebirth. And the dynamics of this rebirth process is very well explained in the what is called Paticca Samuppada, the law of karma and rebirth based on dependent origination of things. Everything is conditioned in the world. And when the mind is conditioned by these mental pollutants like greed and hatred and delusion, it is then that one commits all kinds of karmas which lie in the consciousness in the form of karmic energy or force. And at the end of life, the cumulative force brings about rebirth. And that is how again another journey of life starts, life after life after life, from this plane to that plane. That is samsara. And to make an end of the samsaric process. Now one enjoys all the good things of life as a human being, but having committed all kinds of bad karmas, you end up somewhere else when you die. It may be at a lower plane of existence. And if one does a lot of good karma, one may be born in the Devaloka or Brahmaloka, but that's not the end again, because there also one commits all kinds of karmas, maybe good or maybe bad. So long one is subject to the law of karma and rebirth at any plane, whether human, divine or subhuman, it doesn't matter. The process goes on, and the end, when this ceases, that is the meaning of the word Nirodha. So he said, yes, if you can show me the path, he says the path can be known when you live a disciplined life, a life of discipline at the morality level, a life of discipline at the level of purifying the mind, a life of discipline at the level of perfecting wisdom, leading to the realization of Nibbana. It is this discipline, a holy life, that will enable you to unlock the secret of the word Nirodha. So he said, well, I am prepared to become a monk. So very well then, you take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, Sarana, which simply means you surrender all your self-preferences and your all kinds of fancy views of life and all kinds of practices which have nothing to do with spirituality, and then I will give you. He said, yes, I am prepared to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha and follow the Shila, the self-imposed discipline of perfecting moral purification. Now the word discipline, Sikha in Pali, it is spiritually very, very pregnant indeed, and it has to be fully realized by every practitioner of spiritual life. Discipline is a self-imposed process of development and perfection. That is just what it is. Nobody can discipline another, in the sense that you impose on somebody a certain way of living and threaten him saying that if you don't do this, you'll go to hell. And that is just what most religions do. They threaten the people, frighten the people to practice something in the name of religion, saying that you will go to hell if you don't practice this. That's not the way the Buddha taught. Hell and heaven is not brought about by somebody else or by the threat of somebody else. It is brought about by one's own action, one's own conduct. So, here, discipline in the Buddhist sense is entirely a process undertaken by one's own volition. One establishes oneself on a path. It's a self-imposed involvement or undertaking, and then develops. So at the level of Sila, discipline simply means disciplining one's conduct. That is, perfecting one's action. It's a day-to-day level activity where one undertakes the precepts, let us say the Panchashila, the 5 precepts, and assiduously practices them. Anytime the mind behaves otherwise, let's say you undertake not to kill, that is, you uphold the principle of saving all life, preserving life, and not to violate. The world today is burning because of this urge towards violence, this belief in violence. People think that they can resolve all conflicts only through violence. And the world is burning, burning, burning because of this belief in violence. Buddha said renunciation of violence. That is the path. That is the discipline leading to freedom from violence. And violence will never end in the samsara unless one starts with Sila, renunciation of violence undertaken by one's own volition. Willingly, internally, one renounces violence. Now that is the spirit of Sila. Similarly, not stealing anything, not to misappropriate, not gobbling up somebody else's thing. No. But practice the opposite, dana, give, charity. And once a person disciplines the mind, disciplines oneself by practicing giving, rather than grabbing, mind is liberated. So this is a great discipline, this Panchashila. And similarly, the third, the moral, a life of, renouncing misconduct, sexual misconduct. Today what is happening in the so-called developed countries? Horrible disease. Even here in India, you have a terrible, this AIDS problem, HIV problem. Why? Plain and simple truth is just, there is no sense of moral life, moral conduct with reference to sensuality or sexuality. So marriage is a sanctified thing in Buddhism. Marriage has sanctity. It is this institution that enables one to control the animal passion which forces people to indulge in sexual misconduct. Now once we do that, this discipline oneself through married life, or being loyal to each other, loyal to family values, once we discipline oneself this way, that the animal in man is overcome and the human in man is brought about. And that leads to the divine qualities are brought about in human beings just by renouncing this kind of immoral practices. Similarly, truth. What is important? Not all kinds of doctrines and theories about religion, about this, about that. No. Direct realization of truth. That leads to freedom from samsara. And this direct realization can come only when one disciplines oneself at the level of morality, which means not to tell lie. Start with not telling lie. And you will be surprised how your mind gets conditioned to being truthful, to stick to truth, to stick to the reality of things. Only when you stick to truth and stick to reality of things that you can reach the ultimate reality. There is no other way. So truthfulness has very great sanctity. Today's society all over the world, this world of advertisement and telling lies in 100 different ways in the name of religion. Just because you are a talker, a great orator, and talk all kinds of very catchy slogans and mesmerize the minds of the people and become a big talker, that doesn't mean you are telling the truth. No. Telling the truth is hard fact. It's not always very popular. But this telling the truth only will lead you to ultimate reality. Not popular talks, not mesmerizing the mind of the common people by catchy phrases. No. Truth, truth, truth. That is the way of disciplining oneself at moral level. So, similarly, drinking, renouncing the habit of drugging oneself, of making the mind, dependent on alcoholic stuff. All kinds of, the habit formation. Once you free oneself from that, you free the mind. Moral discipline leads to disciplining the mind. Discipline, the word discipline must be understood. It simply means control. The ability to control oneself at the level of one's action and conduct, then at the level of the mind itself. Once you are able to control yourself, self-restraint, at the level of action, day-to-day life, day-to-day action, then you also control the mind. And further you undertake in the discipline of meditation. Disciplining the mind means enabling one to control the mind through practice of meditation. There is nothing very mystic about meditation, no. It is exercising the mind in a certain manner, based on reality, based on facts, and not all kinds of theories and dogmas of religious beliefs like self, like soul, and some God who is going to, Creator is going to free you and all that. No, none of this business. It's just plain disciplining the mind, purifying the mind, perfecting the mind itself, and thereby bringing out all the potentials of mind. Mind is a great mind of great power and wisdom. So once we purify the mind through meditation, all the potentials and powers of mind come in the fore. They come up in the surface, enabling oneself to acquire such spiritual power that leads to freedom. So, discipline of my mental discipline ultimately is meant to bring about disciplining intelligence. Now this is a world of information in which we live. Knowledge. And knowledge has gone mad, literally. One knows too much only to get involved in all kinds of delusion, the opposite of knowledge. So if knowledge leads to delusion, if knowledge leads to greed, if knowledge leads to anger, if knowledge leads to war, what is the fun of having such knowledge? Our entire educational system requires rethinking, reorientation. We are acquiring knowledge to destroy ourselves. So the Buddha says, no. That is not the way. Acquire such knowledge that leads to freedom of mind, that brings about the power to discipline oneself at the moral level, discipline oneself at the mental level, discipline oneself at the knowledge, intelligence knowledge level. So if our intelligence, goes haywire, and we destroy ourselves with our intelligence, what is the fun of having such intelligence? There is no fun at all. Self-destruction is not what people want. It doesn't make sense at all. So if intelligence we must cultivate that kind of intelligence that enables us to directly penetrate into the reality of life itself. What is life? How many of you have really looked inwards and questioned yourself? What is the meaning of life? What for do we live? Is it to be carried away by words, carried away by theories, carried away by all kinds of worldly things? No. Intelligence and knowledge, if we have, it is to know what we are first. It starts with self-knowledge. Knowledge of how the mind is working, how the world is working, why we function in a day-to-day life in a certain manner. So if we know the secret of all this, that is wisdom. That's a kind of intelligence that opens up the reality of life. Reality of life is very simple, my dear. Everything is changing from moment to moment. Nothing is permanent. There is nothing called a permanent soul or self or God or anybody for that matter. The whole universe is in a state of motion. It is moving, moving, moving. Therefore it is dynamic, and in a dynamic context there is no permanence. Everything is changing and changing not for the better, or very often, most often, changing for the worse. We have become wedded to science now and technology. What is it that science is doing? You know everything about the world, but you don't know yourself. What an irony, if that is what science does. So science itself needs to be changed. We have to question science itself. Where is it leading us? If it is leading us to more materialism, to grab more and more things, to acquire more and more things, and become more and more attached to it, attached to things, and then end up carrying nothing when you die. Keep on accumulating things, and end up having nothing, carrying nothing. That's right. So the wisdom, the knowledge, the intelligence that enables us to go beyond the sphere of impermanence, beyond the sphere of suffering that is brought about by impermanence. Impermanence means instability. Nothing is stable, which simply means unpredictability. Nothing can be predicted. You can't say what is going to happen to you after 5 minutes. Why boast so much about yourself? Why think you are such a big fellow when you are not? When you don't know yourself or what is going to happen to you after 10 minutes, why boast about your knowledge and your so-called skill and your so-called abilities and power? That is the reality of life. Face impermanence. Face suffering that is caused by impermanence. Face the unpredictability, uncertainty of everything. So that is where knowledge must lead us to wisdom, and wisdom must open up reality of impermanence, anicca, dukkha, anatta. The pervading law of impermanence leading to be born again and again, or things happening again and again and again and again. A farmer, you see, farming year after year after year after. No end to all this process. Getting up in the morning and washing the dirty mouth because it smells again and again and again. And you still think that the life of a human body is so beautiful, wonderful. No. That which changes moment to moment cannot be so pure, cannot be so attractive. There is also an unattractive, repulsive aspect of the body. We must know that too. No harm trying to think that you are beautiful or beautifying yourself. Okay, go ahead. But also know the body stinks. So, wisdom lies in seeing both the sides of life. If there is beauty, there is ugliness. If there is impermanence, there is also eternal peace, eternal happiness. That is the message of the Buddha. That is Nibbana. And what is really worthwhile to pursue is to pursue Nibbana, freedom, and enter into the eternal state of peace, Nibbanang Paramang Sukhang, eternal peace and happiness, bliss. With this I conclude. May the grace of Lord Buddha, his Dhamma and Sangha, surround your life with wisdom, enable you to have complete mastery over yourself. May you all be happy.